That young man had given his whole life to his family. He set aside his own dreams and buried his happiness for their sake. In the end it meant nothing. He was betrayed and cut down by his own brother, right before their father's eyes. Not long before that moment, he had questioned the man standing in front of him about the reason for his visit. The reply had come without warmth or delay. The purpose was simple: to eliminate him. Hearing it, the truth became clear. From the start, the entire squad had been nothing but bait, meant to draw attention and be discarded once they were no longer needed. The man stared at him with open disdain and declared that this was the only role fit for someone born without wings. With cruel mockery, he referred to him as the foolish son Ash Elmhine. The Elmhine house was known across the continent as the strongest military bloodline, guardians of the royal family for generations. At its peak stood Rodrik Elmhine, the only man in the nation who bore all 7 wings. Wings were not mere ornaments. They were a crest carved into the back, a mark of magical strength. The greater the number of wings, the stronger the magic sealed within the body. Within the Elmhine household, only those marked by wings could wield that power. Years earlier, during a deadly snowstorm that had nearly claimed his life, Rodrik had saved him. Believing that survival carried meaning, Ash devoted himself completely to repaying that debt. He gave everything. Still, he was never recognized. His brothers ridiculed him without pause, branding him wingless because he lacked the crest that defined their lineage. Ash endured it all. He trained relentlessly day after day, convinced that effort would one day earn respect. That illusion collapsed during this mission. His unit had been surrounded on every side, with no path of escape. Only now did he understand. They had been sent there to be slaughtered. He demanded an explanation. He questioned whether this was the reward for a lifetime of loyalty. Whether betrayal was the final answer from his father. Rodrik's response carried no feeling. A tool, he implied, had no right to expectations. He labeled Ash an eyesore and gave the order to dispose of him. Something inside Ash snapped. Anger and despair surged together as he rushed forward, swinging his blade toward Rodrik's throat. Regret burned within him for ever placing faith in that man. The strike did nothing more than graze Rodrik's skin. In an instant, chains coiled around Ash from behind. 2 figures stepped into view, men he had once called brothers. One cut off his arm. The other shattered his leg. Blood filled his mouth as his body crashed against the ground. Laughter echoed above him. His brothers mocked him, reminding him that creatures without wings belonged on the ground, crawling in the dirt. Ash tightened his remaining fist and forced out one final question. If he had always been meant to be discarded, then why had his life been saved years ago? Rodrik seized him by the hair and answered with cold detachment. There had never been any special reason. Ash had never held value. What truly mattered was the power of the 7 wings contained within a body. Shock froze Ash in place as Rodrik continued, stating that his mother had been useful. She had carried and delivered a child like Ash for his benefit alone. The meaning behind those words did not reach him. Confusion filled his mind. Before he could seek clarity, a blade drove through his back. Agony exploded through his body. Darkness swallowed his sight as his strength drained away. While his awareness slipped, a final thought surfaced. He questioned if this was truly the end of his life, and whether his existence had ever held any value. A sudden wave of cold struck his face. His eyes flew open. For a brief second he wondered if he had reached the world beyond death. The freezing wind cut into his skin. Each breath scorched his lungs. Then the truth settled in. He was still alive. He lay in the heart of a violent snowstorm, resting weakly in a woman's arms. Fear surged through him as he tried to move, only to freeze in shock. Something felt wrong. His legs were far too small. He lifted a hand before his eyes and stared in disbelief. It was the hand of an infant. Shock overwhelmed him. His body had become that of a newborn. When he looked up at the woman holding him, he noticed she was no longer breathing. Her body was stiff and unmoving. She was dead. Ash activated his search ability. His awareness stretched beyond the storm. Through the swirling snow, he sensed 3 riders on horseback pushing forward. They were searching urgently. One of them shouted for speed, declaring that for Lord Rodrik's sake, they had to retrieve the infant the woman had taken. Ash's heart nearly stopped. Weakly, he questioned if he had heard correctly. Rodrik. His father's name. If they were hunting an infant, the target was obvious. In his former life, there had been rumors that he had been found on a snowy night like this. A dreadful thought crept into his mind. Had he returned to the past? The idea felt insane. Impossible. Yet every detail pointed toward it. The riders were getting closer. One fact became clear. If he remained there, he would be captured and brought back to the Elmhain estate. He would once again belong to Rodrik. Gathering what little will he possessed, Ash began to crawl. Mana flowed faintly into his tiny hands, pushing his fragile body forward bit by bit. His limbs shook violently. His breaths grew uneven and thin. The cold seeped deep into his bones while feverish heat burned through his veins. His body begged to stop. He refused. He crawled because stopping meant death. And survival meant one thing. One day he would take revenge on Rodrik Elmhain. Time dragged on in pain. Gradually the storm weakened. The sun began to rise over the white horizon. The infant forced himself to move a little farther before finally collapsing unconscious in front of a young girl. The girl cried out, saying she had called her father because she had found something. The man who approached behind her was Viscount Highfried, a noble of high rank. He carefully lifted the baby into his arms. Confusion marked his face. He wondered why a child would be in such a place. Then his gaze shifted to the snow behind them. A long, uneven trail of tiny crawl marks stretched across the frozen ground. The Viscount went still. He stared at the distance the infant had crossed through the storm. Shock filled him as he questioned what kind of child could survive such a trial and who this baby truly was. Sometime later, Ash drifted into a strange dream. In front of him, a red-haired baby appeared, wobbling closer with a bright and innocent look. Before Ash could respond, the child suddenly grabbed his nose. He jerked awake. The first sight that greeted him was pure chaos. 5 little girls crowded around him, their faces shining with excitement as they all reached toward him at once. Small hands tugged at his sleeves and even at his legs, each one trying to pull him away to play. He had no clue how things had turned into this or why his new life had become so noisy. Just as the situation was about to spiral out of control, the white-haired girl he had seen earlier stepped forward. She was clearly the oldest. With a serious look, she picked Ash up and pulled him away from her sisters, scolding them for going too far. But Ash twisted free from her arms. The instant his feet touched the ground, he started crawling away. Behind him, the small red-haired girl shouted in excitement. In the next second, all 5 girls rushed after him. Panic hit him. He did not understand why they were chasing him, yet his instincts screamed that something was wrong. Without thinking, mana flowed through his tiny body. His eyes turned gold. A surge of magic burst from his back. In a flash, he rose off the floor. He was flying. Ash had no idea how it happened. He could not control it. His body spun in the air as he shot upward toward the ceiling. Just before he could crash, a firm pair of arms caught him midair. The man holding him stared in disbelief, commenting that the child had fallen from above and that Ash was truly unusual. As Ash looked up at him, recognition struck hard. The man was Viscount Hefred Elmhain, the older brother of Rodrik Elmhain. A cold sensation ran through Ash's soul. Hefred Elmhain, head of the Viscount branch of House Elmhain. In the past, Hefred and Rodrik had been known as the twin pillars who defended the royal family. Ash clearly remembered that this Viscount and his entire household would later die during a civil war. That memory confirmed everything. He had truly returned to the past. A bitter feeling rose inside him. He had escaped the main house, only to be discovered by another branch of the same bloodline. Not long after, Ash found himself resting in the arms of the Viscount's wife. She spoke softly, explaining that his magic had gone out of control and caused him to rise into the air. She admitted she had sensed from the beginning that he was not an ordinary child. Looking at his small face, she smiled gently and kissed him, assuring him that although it must have been frightening, he was safe now. Ash went still. He had never known warmth like this. From nearby, Viscount Hefred observed them in silence. After a short pause, he stated firmly that the child carried immense power. Carefully, he lifted Ash's clothing to reveal the mark that proved it. The Viscount's wife gasped when she saw it reflected in the mirror. Clear on Ash's back was the mark of the 7 wings. His thoughts went blank. Then memories surged forward, and his father's voice echoed inside his mind. Rodrik's icy words about needing the power of the 7 wings inside his body echoed clearly in his mind. At last, everything connected. That night in the snow, the so-called act of salvation had never been mercy. Rodrik had pulled him from death for a single purpose: to take the 7 wings for himself. Rage boiled inside Ash. His own father had torn the wings from his body and then mocked him as if he had been born without them. The woman holding him grew serious and asked the Viscount what should be done with the child. In her arms, Ash felt panic rise. This was a critical moment. He could not allow the power of the 7 wings to return to House Elmhain. He needed that strength to survive. He needed it for revenge. Then the Viscount made his decision. Calm and firm, he announced that he would raise the boy as his own son. Silence filled the room. Ash stared at him, stunned. Viscount Hefford slowly reached out and gently brushed the baby's hair. He described the child as a fledgling who had not yet learned to fly and stated that he would protect and guide him until the day he could rise on his own. Ash could not respond. He had never been treated with such warmth. A sudden noise struck near the doorway. The 5 girls who had been secretly listening lost their balance and tumbled into the room. The Viscount looked at them calmly and asked if they had been spying. The eldest quickly apologized, explaining that they had only been worried about the baby. The second daughter stepped forward and asked what name the child would carry. The woman hesitated for a moment, then smiled softly. Lifting the baby slightly, she declared that his name would be Aster, like a newly born star shining within their house. 10 years passed in what felt like an instant. The setting shifted to the Grand Mansion, where the yearly sword dance assembly was being held. A carriage rolled to a controlled stop at the gates. Viscount Hefford Elmhine stepped down first, and a guard immediately bowed in respect. Soon after, a young man exited the carriage. It was Aster. No longer a helpless infant, he had grown into a tall and steady teenager. His calm eyes carried a weight far beyond his years. He turned back toward the carriage and extended his hand, reminding his sister to step down carefully. A red-haired girl placed her hand in his and descended with a bright smile. She was Alphen, once the red-haired baby who had pinched his nose, now his younger sister. Together, the siblings walked into a vast ballroom filled with light. They had arrived for the Sword Dance Assembly, a yearly gathering hosted by a ducal house tied to the Elmhine name. 4 noble families devoted to martial power, the event served to strengthen alliances and deepen ties. In truth, it was a silent battlefield. Each noble house presented its most talented young swordsmen, seeking prestige, influence, and acknowledgement. As Aster and Alphen advanced through the hall, quiet whispers began to spread among the guests. Some commented that the Viscount branch of Elmhine lacked a true heir. Some mocked openly, claiming that since the Viscount house had failed to produce a proper heir, they had picked up some unknown stray from nowhere. With cold eyes, they questioned how long that branch would be allowed to stain the Elmhine name. Attention slowly shifted toward Aster. So this was the adopted boy. Alphen tightened her fists and stepped closer to him, urging him not to let the cruel whispers affect him. She insisted they could not afford to show weakness in a place like this. Aster noticed what she failed to see herself. Her hands were shaking. At that moment, Lord Hefford spoke in a calm tone, stating that such reactions simply reflected the current position of the Viscount house. As they paused before the towering gates, he turned to Aster and made it clear that he wanted him to witness this reality. He questioned whether Aster felt frustrated by their standing. Aster responded with a faint smile, expressing that this level of cold reception suited him well enough. Hefford let out a quiet laugh, clearly satisfied, and admitted that such an answer was reassuring. Standing before the Grand Castle, Aster's thoughts drifted to his former life. Back then he had been the shame of House Elmhine. His first step into noble society had turned into a complete disaster. This very place carried painful memories. But now everything was different. The 7 wings rested within him. He was no longer the same powerless child. His eyes sharpened with silent resolve. This time he would reshape his destiny. The family advanced toward the massive entrance. From a high window, 2 young men observed their approach with clear disdain. They were the same brothers who had tormented him in his past life. Aster noticed them, yet his expression remained steady. With firm steps, all sides moved toward the grand doors, each holding their own motives. Within his heart, Aster made a silent promise. This time, his debut in high society would not end in disgrace. It would shine. Inside the main hall, an arena stood at the center. 2 young swordsmen clashed fiercely within it. The era belonged to knights. To be acknowledged as one required both strength and elegance. Strength was proven by skill with the blade. Elegance was measured through honor and reputation. Steel collided against steel as the duel intensified. Both fighters demonstrated polished and disciplined techniques. As they prepared for another exchange, the balance shifted. A glowing wing crest appeared on one fighter's wrist. In an instant, the match was decided. He crushed his opponent, cutting cleanly through his sword and ending the duel without hesitation. The audience erupted in applause. The greatest sign of power and grace had revealed itself, the wing crest. From the balcony above, Alphen murmured that the atmosphere felt overwhelming. She admitted that she now understood why her sisters, Fren and Flare, had chosen not to attend. Beside her, Aster watched the arena in silence. Memories from his previous life surfaced. Laughter directed at him, humiliation, the moment he had fallen in defeat and been ridiculed after a duel. His gaze turned distant. Alphen noticed the distant look in his eyes and called his name, asking if he felt nervous about attending his first sword dance assembly. Aster gave a small smile and said he felt no fear. Deep down, the emotion was not anxiety but something closer to nostalgia. Alphen frowned, unable to grasp what he meant. Their father, Viscount Hefford Elmhine, informed them that he would be leaving for a meeting and told Aster to keep an eye on Alphen. She immediately objected, insisting she was more capable than him, while Aster calmly labeled her clumsy. The Viscount rested a hand on his son's shoulder and smiled, advising him to build connections since many nobles of his age were present. Then he leaned in slightly and delivered a quiet warning: no one must learn about the Seven Wings. After his father walked away, Aster thought about those words. He could feel unfriendly stares from other young nobles watching from a distance. He wondered how he was supposed to form ties when their eyes were filled with open dislike. Even so, determination settled on his face. He chose to follow his father's advice. When Alphen asked where he intended to go, Aster answered with confidence that he was going to make friends. On the lower floor, several noble youths relaxed around a sofa. Sitting at the center were the two sons of Duke Rodrik. As Aster approached, one of them examined him from head to toe with a mocking look and demanded his identity. Aster greeted him calmly, addressing him as brother-in-law Darius. The unexpected title caused visible surprise among the group. With a polite expression, he introduced himself as Aster Elmhine, the younger brother from the Viscount branch, explaining that he had noticed them earlier and had come simply to offer greetings. Darius's brother let out a scornful remark, pointing out that Aster was nothing more than an adopted son of the Viscount house. Darius laughed harshly, claiming that now it made sense why Aster dared to call himself an Elmhine. Aster recognized them clearly: Darius and Grian, the rightful heirs of House Elmhine. They were the same two who had taken his life in the past. His eyes darkened slightly. Once they had seemed terrifying. Now they looked like children pretending to carry authority. His resolve grew sharper. Suddenly, Alphen grabbed his arm and urged him to leave. At that exact moment, Darius called her name. She froze. With cruel amusement, Darius mocked her, asking if she planned to hide behind her father again. He ordered her to step closer and entertain them. Alphen refused, stating firmly that their families did not share a master and servant bond. She pulled Aster away, but the tremble in her hand revealed the fear she tried to conceal. Darius kept going, throwing insults at Viscount Hefford Elmhine. He accused him of failing in his duty to protect the king and mocked the fact that his own younger brother had cut off his arm as punishment. Alphen lost control and shouted at him to take those words back. Darius answered by spitting his drink straight into her face, disgracing her before everyone present. He sneered that her father must regret having such a worthless daughter, someone not even fit to inherit a small barony. He ridiculed her clothes, suggesting that if she did not want to be drenched again, she should arrive dressed in rags next time. Tears streamed down Alphen's face. Behind her, Aster felt anger rise sharply. He had believed that seeing them again would no longer stir his emotions. That belief shattered instantly. In one smooth movement, he grabbed a wine bottle from the hand of one of Darius's companions. Alphen gasped as he placed a steady hand on her shoulder, calming her without words. Darius laughed in contempt. The bottle flew toward him. Darius caught it easily. At the same moment, Aster's blade flashed. The bottle split cleanly in midair, and wine splashed across Darius's face. The hall fell into complete silence. Aster calmly touched the remaining wine on his sword with his finger and tasted it. After a brief pause, he remarked that it was nothing more than grape juice. A faint smile appeared as he added that the flavor suited a spoiled noble like Darius perfectly. The air shifted. A memory surfaced from 3 years earlier. Brilliant golden light had exploded from Aster's body. The aura had been overwhelming, thick, radiant, unstable. Count Hefford Elmhine had shouted for him to stop, demanding to know if he intended to kill his own sisters. One of them lay unconscious on the floor, while the other stood frozen, unable to approach as golden black energy raged wildly around him. The Viscount had ordered Aster to regain control. Watching the violent aura, Hefford had realized this was the true power of the Seven Wings. He had never imagined such a dangerous force could be sealed inside a child. For the first time, doubt had entered his heart. He had questioned whether anyone could truly control such power. Looking directly at Aster within that storm of energy, He had quietly asked if he believed he could master it. The memory faded. Back in the present, a guard burst into the hall where the main and branch families of House Elmhain were holding a meeting. The guard shouted about an urgent matter, interrupting the discussion. One of the dukes demanded an explanation. The messenger revealed that two sons of House Elmhain, one from the main family and one from the branch, were engaged in a duel. Shock spread through the chamber. Without hesitation, Viscount Hefred Elmhain stood and hurried toward the arena. At the same time, Alfin ran after her father, desperately trying to explain what had taken place. From a balcony overlooking the grand hall, a duke observed the arena below with interest, a faint smile resting on his lips. Below the balcony, Aster and Darius faced each other at the center of the arena, blades locked as stunned spectators watched in silence. The duke observing from above remarked that clashes between brothers of the powerful House Elmhain were rare sights. Other dukes stepped onto the balcony, their attention fixed on the duel. A bearded duke stroked his chin and commented that the outcome of this fight could easily sour the entire sword dance assembly. Inside the arena, Darius activated his wing crest. Energy surged around him as he sneered, calling Aster reckless for daring to challenge a ducal heir. He ridiculed him as a stray raised in the wild, someone ignorant of the vast gap in strength between them. Then he revealed his four-wing crest, its light blazing openly. The younger nobles burst into cheers, murmuring that it was only natural for a ducal heir to stand far above the rest. Wearing a mocking grin, Darius demanded that Aster display his own wing crest, implying that he must be too ashamed to reveal it. Aster responded with calm composure, stating that flaunting a simple pattern was not his way. With a faint, confident smile, he added that such behavior was beneath him. The words ignited Darius's anger. Aster then suggested a wager. If he claimed victory, Darius would offer a public apology. Darius laughed and countered that if he won, Aster would become his servant. With a shout, Darius charged forward, declaring that he would put Aster to work for the rest of his life. Their swords met with explosive force. Aster blocked the strike cleanly, his stance steady and unshaken. Still, he felt the sheer weight of Darius's strength behind every blow. As Darius prepared another attack, mana flared along his blade. He bragged about the power granted by his crest and unleashed a rapid barrage. Aster stayed on the defensive, deflecting each strike with precise timing. From the balcony, Alfin cried out in fear. The bearded duke observed that Darius's technique lacked refinement, but added that skill meant little when faced with overwhelming mana. He explained that if the power of one wing resembled a candle flame, then the mana within four wings was closer to a violent blast. Darius sneered again, taunting Aster and questioning where his earlier confidence had gone. He mocked the promise of forcing an apology, suggesting it had been nothing but empty words. Aster remained silent. He continued to block every attack without hesitation. Frustration grew on Darius's face. He leapt high into the air, channeling mana into both blades as he prepared a decisive strike. From the balcony, a stout duke muttered that the duel was already finished. Darius brought his blades down. Aster lifted his sword and stopped both strikes with ease. The arena fell into complete stillness. Darius stared, stunned, unable to understand what had just occurred. Aster finally spoke, his tone steady and cold. He stated that Darius talked far too much. In the next second he moved. His counterattack struck cleanly, sending Darius flying backward across the arena. Golden light flowed along Aster's blade as he channeled mana into it. Inside he reflected on the past 10 years spent within the Viscount's household, years of discipline, restraint, and patience. He had endured everything, holding back, waiting for this exact moment. Every strike Darius attempted afterward was cut down without mercy. Aster made it clear that all those years had been preparation for this chance, to crush him completely. He advanced with overwhelming pressure. Darius crossed both swords to block, but the force drove him down to one knee. Even Darius's own brother stared in disbelief. The pride of the main family being pushed back so easily was beyond reason. Darius muttered in shock, reminding Aster that he possessed four wings. Aster gave no reply. He simply poured more mana into his sword. A sharp cracking sound rang out. A visible fracture spread across Darius's blade. The watching nobles were stunned. The duel had turned entirely one-sided. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. It seemed House Elmhain still harbored a monster like this. Black and gold aura erupted violently from Aster's body, twisting together like a raging storm. On the balcony, Viscount Hefred clenched his fist, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control. Darius was completely overwhelmed. Inside Aster's mind, old memories rose, the cruel laughter from his previous life, the blade that had killed him, the humiliation and pain. The power of the 7 wings roared within him. He stepped forward, ready to finish it. From above, his father's voice called out, urging him to stop and regain control. Aster halted at the final instant. His last strike fell. Both of Darius's swords shattered cleanly and dropped to the floor. Silence swallowed the arena. Darius collapsed, frozen in terror, staring at Aster's blade embedded in the ground just inches from his body. His legs shook uncontrollably, and whatever pride he had left disappeared. Aster looked down at him and spoke with icy calm. He remarked that next time Darius should dress properly, because if he intended to spill wine on others, he should be ready to be drenched himself. Then Aster turned away. Under his breath, he reminded himself that he was no longer Ash the Wingless. For now that truth was enough. From the balcony, his sister met his eyes and gave him a proud, satisfied smile. Aster answered with a bright expression. Suddenly, a terrifying aura burst from behind him near the staircase. Someone was releasing power in pure fury. Aster turned instantly. Standing there was Rodrik Elmhine, head of the main family, his former father. The entire hall tightened with tension. Even Aster felt the crushing weight of that presence pressing down on him. When Rodrik finally withdrew his aura, whispers spread across the crowd. No one could believe what they had witnessed. The youngest son of a Viscount branch had defeated the third son of the main family. This was no small matter. Everyone understood that the main house would not ignore such humiliation. Rodrik stepped forward. Aster remained calm, posture straight, already prepared for what would follow. On the ground, Darius's face twisted with strange satisfaction. Darius forced himself upright and grabbed onto his father's robes. A twisted laugh escaped him as he hurled insults at Aster, calling him a bastard who dared challenge the main family despite being nothing more than a tainted half-blood. He pleaded for his father to step in and crush him with overwhelming power. Rodrik did not spare Aster a glance. His eyes turned cold as he looked down at Darius. Without warning, he drove the sheath of his sword straight through his own son's hand. A sharp crack rang out as Darius's palm slammed against the floor. A scream tore from his throat. Shock rippled across the hall. Grian stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Rodrik's voice remained calm yet merciless. He questioned why someone who had lost so completely dared to laugh after dragging the family's honor through the dirt. Lifting his sword, he declared that a man incapable of avenging himself had no right to wield a blade. From the balcony, Viscount Hefford understood his brother's intention and called out for him to stop. The hall fell silent. Aster had stepped forward. He placed himself directly in the path of Rodrik's sword. Rodrik's gaze shifted to him, demanding to know what he thought he was doing. Aster answered evenly. Darius had not yet apologized to his sister. Any punishment could wait until that was done. Rodrik's aura burst outward violently. Fury twisted his expression as he snarled that an orphan taken in by Hefford dared to stand before him. He questioned whether Aster truly believed himself to be part of House Elmhine without sharing its blood. Aster did not move. He stated firmly that he was the Viscount's son, regardless of blood. From his father, he had learned the pride of a knight and the burden carried by a family name. Rodrik's eyes flicked briefly toward Hefford on the balcony. Then his expression hardened further. He declared that as a member of the Viscount branch, Aster had brought unnecessary disgrace upon the honor of the main house. He invoked the legacy of the Elmhine name, the pillar of 12,000 knights and the sword that defended the king. Such an offense, he said, could not be dismissed as a childish dispute. The dukes from the branch families observed carefully, eager to see how the confrontation would unfold. Rodrik continued, reminding Aster that his father had once sacrificed an arm as compensation for disloyalty. He demanded to know what Aster was prepared to offer in return. Aster responded without hesitation. This had not been a petty quarrel. It had been a proper duel. He had answered insult with steel. He repeated Rodrik's own principle. Those unable to claim revenge for themselves had no right to lift a sword. Then, with cold certainty, Aster declared that he had no intention of surrendering even a single finger. On the balcony, Alphen clenched her teeth as she listened to every word her brother spoke. The bearded duke stared in stunned silence. The blue-haired duke suddenly broke into loud laughter, stunned that the one daring to oppose Rodrik Elmhine was merely a 10-year-old child. Rodrik remained silent, studying Aster for a long moment. Then, without haste, he returned his sword to its sheath. He instructed Aster to take his stance. Aster did not fully grasp his meaning, but he complied. In the next instant, steel flashed. Aster's body was hurled backward. He crashed violently into the far wall beyond the arena. The impact split stone and echoed through the hall. Alfin screamed. From the balcony, Viscount Hefford shouted his brother's name in fury. He leapt down with his sword drawn, charging at Rodrik. The strike was stopped effortlessly. Rodrik blocked the blow without even shifting his footing. Hefford abandoned the clash at once and rushed toward Aster, panic in his voice as he called for his son. What he saw froze him. Aster was standing. His sword lay shattered. Blood marked his body, yet his posture remained steady. His expression had not changed. Rodrik glanced at him one final time. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Darius followed in silence. Aster swayed slightly but forced himself upright. Hefford reached him immediately, supporting him. Aster spoke calmly, stating that he had kept his promise. His word had not broken. Hefford answered quietly that he had seen everything. He told Aster that he had been magnificent. Back on the balcony, the bearded duke remarked that Rodrik's action had seemed somewhat childish. Still, he admitted that allowing the boy to leave untouched would have made the main family lose all dignity. He added that standing before Rodrik Elmhine himself, speaking so boldly and surviving, was no small achievement. That child, he concluded, was a rising star. With a faint smile, the Duke commented that for Aster, this had been the strongest possible debut in high society. The heavy-set Duke exhaled and admitted that the boy had unsettled him. For a brief moment he had believed House Elmhine might fracture entirely. Rodrik cast a brief look toward his brother and Aster. He stated that an era of chaos would one day arrive, a storm fierce enough to split the world into two, perhaps even three parts. The scene shifted to the training grounds of the Viscount branch of House Elmhine. Several knights observed as a sparring session unfolded. Two figures exchanged blows with wooden swords. One knight, smiling easily, praised his master's performance and described it as splendid. The one being praised was Aster. Around them, the knights murmured in low voices. For someone so young, his swordsmanship was terrifying. They noted that his training had intensified even more after the sword dance assembly. One knight recalled how Aster had defeated the third son of the Elmhine main house. The group could not conceal their satisfaction. For years, the main house had treated the Viscount branch with contempt. Watching one of their own stand firm against them had felt deeply satisfying to the knights. Aster continued cutting down opponent after opponent during training, but his mind was elsewhere. At the sword dance assembly, he had displayed enough strength and presence to silence those who had branded his family a stain on House Elmhine. Even so, he understood that the true obstacle still remained. The main house. Part of him wished he had tested himself further that day, facing more challengers on that stage. Yet he was fully aware of reality. At his current level, he stood no chance against Rodrik Elmhine. To Aster, a wing crest was merely a sign of magical potential. Power granted at birth meant little if it could not be mastered. Even now, he could not draw out the full strength of the 7 wings. If he did not have to worry about losing control and falling into a berserk state, he could push that power to its true limits. With one final exchange, he struck down the last knight before him. Several men lay sprawled on the ground. Aster's eyes remained sharp as he calmly asked if anyone else wished to challenge him. Before anyone could respond, a familiar voice cut in. Alfin approached, commenting that he was overexerting himself again. She questioned whether he even understood the meaning of rest and informed him that their father was summoning him. Aster agreed immediately and said he would go at once. As they walked, he glanced at her attire and made a remark. Alfin turned toward him, confused at first. Aster explained that it was unusual to see her dressed like that, since she once disliked the outfit for lacking charm. She responded that balance mattered. Watching him train relentlessly had made her realize she could not remain the same forever either. Her words caught him off guard. For a brief moment, he had nothing to say, especially when she lifted her training sword toward him with a confident smile. She stated that once he returned, they would spend time sparring together. Aster answered with a grin, accepting the challenge and lightly asking her to go easy on him. Some time later he arrived at his father's office. Upon entering, Viscount Hefford told him to sit. Aster obeyed, taking the seat opposite his father with a composed expression. Hefford observed that 10 years had passed since they had brought Aster into the family. He admitted that he had once thought about waiting until Aster grew older, but had decided the time to act had come. He placed a small case on the desk and opened it. Inside rested a ring. Hefford revealed that the ring symbolized succession, the mark of the next head of the Viscount branch. Then he stated clearly that he intended for Aster to become his successor. Aster froze in shock. Hefford explained that their family's situation was fragile. As a branch of House Elmhain entrusted with land and duty, they carried heavy responsibility. The position of the next head could not remain empty forever. Aster asked whether his sisters knew about this decision. Hefford replied that the elder sisters would return from the Night Academy in 3 days, and he intended to gather everyone before speaking openly about it. The news caught Aster off guard. Malfa and Kudo were coming back. He admitted honestly that they would not accept it easily, especially Kudo. She resented him for being male and for bearing the 7 wings. Aster rose from his seat and stated that he could not take the position. He remembered clearly the day he had nearly harmed one of his sisters after losing control of his magic. He acknowledged that he lacked the confidence to withstand their anger, let alone persuade them to support him. Hefford gave a faint, knowing smile. He remarked that at times he wondered whether Aster had ever truly lived as a child. Reaching to the side, he picked up another box and explained that the ring shown earlier had originally been intended as a reward for Aster's performance at the sword dance assembly. He set the new box on the table. After reconsidering, he believed Aster would value what was inside far more. When Aster opened it, his breath caught. Resting inside was the magic sword Gram. Hefford explained that Gram was a blade capable of devouring magic, a weapon designed to regulate and restrain the overwhelming force of the 7 wings. Soon after, father and son stood deep within a forest. Hefford remarked that the location would be suitable. Aster questioned the need to travel so far. If the purpose had only been to show him the sword, the dojo would have sufficed. His father answered plainly that it would not. He added dryly that Aster had a habit of destroying castle walls whenever his powers spiraled out of control. Hefford then formally introduced the weapon. Gram was a demonic blade, bound to flame, traditionally passed down to the eldest sons of House Elmhain. For generations it had remained in the hands of the main family, but Hefford had retrieved it specifically for Aster. He removed the covering. Aster stared in shock. There was no blade. Hefford explained calmly that Gram existed as a potential weapon. When infused with mana, it would take form according to the wielder's own power. To demonstrate, Hefford released his energy. A massive wave of red magic burst outward. The forest shook as a blazing arc cut through the distant trees, slicing everything in its path with brutal precision. The air trembled from the force. Hefford warned that if the wielder's resolve faltered even slightly, the sword would devour all of their mana instead. That was the reason Gram carried such a grim reputation. He then handed the weapon to Aster and asked if he wished to attempt it. Aster's expression grew firm. He accepted the sword. The moment he began channeling magic into it, something extraordinary occurred. His golden mana flowed naturally without resistance, effortless. Impossible to stop. Back at the castle, knights training in the yard suddenly paused. A massive red streak tore across the sky above them. One knight muttered in disbelief, wondering if a comet had fallen. Another snapped at him, calling him foolish and pointing out that the light had risen from the opposite direction. Elfin also saw the blazing trail. In a low voice, she murmured that it had to be Aster. Deep in the forest, Aster sat on the ground, a faint smile forming on his face as he admitted that the weapon was beyond belief. Hefford, however, continued staring at the sky. He said quietly that the truly unbelievable thing was Aster himself. Throughout the long history of House Elmhain, across countless generations, not a single person had ever borne the crest of 7 wings. If Aster mastered that power completely, Hefford declared, he would one day surpass both himself and Rodrik Elmhain, despite their 6 wings. The thought struck Aster deeply. To surpass the head of House Elmhain. Hefford's tone shifted, becoming grave. He warned that power of such scale would inevitably create conflict. If the truth about the 7 wings became known, some would envy him. Others would hate him. Many would attempt to use him. Some would try to eliminate him entirely. Hefford extended his hand. He told Aster that he must grow strong so that he would never again regret being powerless. Aster clasped his father's hand firmly. Inside, he swore he would never endure another miserable life like the one he had lost. He thanked his father and vowed to master both the 7 wings and the world itself. 3 days later, the scene shifted. The Viscount family welcomed home their elder daughters. Malfa and Kudo had returned from the Night Academy. Kudo stepped forward first, wearing a bright smile as she opened her arms wide, announcing that it was time for a reunion embrace with their beloved older sister. Instead, the younger girls ran straight past her and threw themselves into Malfa's arms. Kyudo froze. Shock crossed her face as she demanded to know why she had been ignored. The two sisters answered innocently that Kyudo always ruined their hair. Kyudo denied it immediately, insisting that she had mastered chivalry perfectly and would never behave in such an unrefined way. Then she noticed Alphen standing quietly nearby. Without warning, Kyudo pulled Alphen into a tight embrace, praising her for being a good girl while vigorously ruffling and completely destroying her hair. She then demanded to know why Alphen had not come to her first. Not long after, Manhwa asked their parents where Aster was. They briefly explained that he was out training. Kyudo, who had been listening carefully, grew curious. The scene shifted back to the forest. Aster stood alone, gripping the hilt of Gram. His jaw was tight as golden mana flickered around the incomplete blade. He muttered that it was still not enough. He could now shape the sword with magic, but all he could truly do was suppress its power. Compared to his father's effortless demonstration, the difference felt vast. He questioned silently how his father had made it look so simple. A voice came from behind him. Kyudo observed that the display looked impressive. Aster turned in surprise and asked if Sister Kyudo had returned. She gave a faint smile and remarked that he had not even appeared to welcome his returning sister, calling it rather cold. She questioned whether he no longer considered them important, or if he now believed himself exceptional. She added that she had heard everything about the sword dance assembly. Even at the Night Academy, his name had been circulating. Their father, she noted, must be proud. Aster responded calmly that he had also heard of Kyudo's accomplishments. Though still a trainee, she had excelled in multiple missions and had been awarded the Platinum Order, the honorary Knight Medal of the Year. Kyudo accepted the praise without hesitation, but pointed out that despite all of that, she still could not inherit their father's seat. After a short pause, she asked if it was true that Aster had refused the succession. Inside, Aster wondered who had told her. He suspected their father and immediately sensed trouble. Outwardly, he answered that he had not intended to reject it outright. He simply believed he was not yet qualified. Kyudo stepped closer. Her tone dropped. Both he and their father, she said, knew exactly what her dream was. She accused them of cruelty. Without warning, she drew her sword. Before Aster could react, she cut through a nearby tree and sent the heavy trunk flying toward him. He jumped aside, barely avoiding the impact, and demanded to know what she was doing. Kyudo answered evenly that it had been a while, and suggested that her little brother allow his older sister to test him. She smiled and warned that next time she would not restrain herself. Aster told her to stop, explaining that his sword was still incomplete. Kyudo asked coldly whether he would use that same excuse when facing a real enemy. Aster had no answer. She stated that a knight must always see himself as standing on a battlefield. If he continued to hold back, she warned, she would crush him. With that, she launched herself into the air. Aster understood immediately that she was serious. He was barely maintaining control of his magic, but he had no choice. He poured mana into Gram. Because he knew one thing clearly, if he did not, Sister Kyudo would truly attempt to kill him. Their battle raged deeper into the forest. Shockwaves burst outward with each collision, waves of pressure and flashes of light tearing through the trees and shaking the ground. Even from a distance, the force of their clash was visible. Kyudo clicked her tongue as she swung again, her face sharp and relentless. She commented that Aster's blade remained precise as ever, admitting she had not expected him to keep pace with her after all the growth she had gained at the Night Academy. Aster blocked strike after strike, the impact sending tremors through his arms. She pressed him further, questioning what excuse he thought that unfinished sword would serve. Before he could respond properly, she twisted her stance and launched him backward with crushing force. She declared coldly that his control over mana was pitiful. Aster slid across the ground but managed to stay upright, his boots carving deep lines into the earth. He looked up at her and observed that she remained as merciless as he remembered. His thoughts drifted inward. Kyudo had always been this way. As the only male in the family with the formal right to inherit, and as the bearer of a wing crest superior to anyone else within the household, he had always stood in her path. To her, his very existence felt unjust. She was like a storm, ready to clash at the slightest hint of unfairness. If he had to define it simply, she was his natural enemy. Without warning, Kyudo leapt high into the air. The instant Aster saw her rise, he understood what was coming. She brought her sword down with devastating force. The impact exploded against the forest floor, sending another violent shockwave rippling outward. Kyudo looked down at him and declared that he was unfit to become the next head of the family. The scene shifted. Inside their father's study, Alphen stood by the window, clearly uneasy. She questioned whether it was truly wise to leave those two alone, pointing out that a clash between siblings at that level could end in death. Hefford answered calmly that the two of them were strong rivals. They might act recklessly, he admitted, but it would not go that far. Still unsettled, Alphen said she hoped he was right. After a moment of silence, she asked why her sisters had been summoned back from the Night Academy in the first place. She sensed that it was not merely about succession. Hefford opened a drawer and retrieved something. The instant Alphen saw it, her breath caught. It was a sealed envelope bearing the mark of the Elmhain family. Her father explained that it was a formal summons from the Elmhain main house. Hefford added that the elders who held true authority within the core of the family seemed eager to see their grandchild in person. Alphen quietly asked whether the matter was truly that grave. Hefford answered without pause. At its worst, he said, they could lose Aster. Meanwhile, deep within the forest, the clash continued. Steel met steel again and again, each collision sending shockwaves tearing through the trees. As their blades crossed, Aster spoke firmly, telling Kyudo to stop speaking recklessly. He reminded her that he had already refused the position of successor and that she knew it. Kyudo lifted her sword high, irritation twisting her face. She responded that his refusal was precisely what she could not accept. Her blade came down with crushing force. Aster barely caught the strike. The impact was overwhelming, far heavier than expected. It did not feel like facing a refined swordsman. It felt like standing before a troll swinging a massive warhammer without restraint. Kyudo forced even more strength into the blow. At the final instant, Aster twisted his wrist and flipped his blade aside. Her strike smashed into the ground instead. He demanded sharply whether she would finally listen. Kyudo gave a faint smile and questioned whether he was already looking for an escape. Then she unleashed her raw power without holding back. Aster was thrown sideways, crashing into a tree. The bark shattered behind him. He coughed blood, disbelief widening his eyes. Kyudo looked down at him and declared that if all he relied on was swinging a sword, he was nothing more than third-rate. She continued coldly, explaining that even those capable of handling mana alone were only second-rate. True first-rate belonged only to those who mastered both sword and mana together. Her gaze hardened as she admitted her deep disappointment. She explained that the difference in wing crests directly determined the amount of mana one could command. Even a single wing gap meant nearly triple the power. In terms of raw strength and endurance, she, bearing 5 wings, was already 2 full stages below him and his 7-wing crest. Yet, despite that advantage, he avoided direct clashes of power and leaned on refined technique instead. Another faint smile crossed her face as she asked whether he truly lacked faith in his own strength, or whether he feared losing control again, just as he had 3 years earlier. Her words struck deeper than any blade. Aster froze. Shock rippled through him as the thought formed. Was he still afraid because of that incident? He had never consciously faced that possibility. For the first time, he wondered if he had been limiting himself without realizing it. His gaze dropped to the hilt of his sword. He muttered inwardly that perhaps Graham felt unstable for the same reason, because he had been forcibly suppressing his mana all along. Kyudo's expression grew firm. She stated that Aster possessed everything she had ever desired. If he intended to let those blessings decay through arrogance and hesitation, then he should surrender them to her instead. Kyudo rushed forward, no longer hiding her killing intent. Aster did not retreat. He faced her full-powered strike head-on and answered with his own swing. The collision thundered through the forest, shaking the trees around them. Kyudo was pushed backward, her footing slipping as disbelief crossed her face. She had not expected him to repel her strongest attack. Aster allowed a faint smile. He told her that her words had finally forced him to awaken. Then he accelerated. Kyudo narrowed her eyes, wondering why he was charging without even stabilizing his blade. She adjusted her stance, briefly considering whether he had exhausted his mana, but immediately dismissed the idea as impossible. As Aster advanced, mana flooded into his sword. The 7 wings, he realized, held an unprecedented and near-endless reserve of power. He knew he could not yet control it perfectly. Instead of chasing precision, he discarded restraint entirely. For a single instant, he let go of the blade itself and focused only on the motion. All of his mana poured into that attack. The strike fell. Kyudo blocked it with ease. She steadied herself and gave a faint smile, questioning whether he was acting on impulse again. Aster met her eyes with complete seriousness. He declared that he had no intention of wasting this second life. He would seize the power of the 7 wings, the sword Graham, and even his place within the family. These were things he had never been able to claim before, no matter how hard he had struggled. At the mention of a second life, Kyudo froze for the briefest moment. Shock flickered across her face. Aster closed the gap. Mana surged violently into his blade. He leapt upward, gathering every ounce of strength he possessed, and then vanished from her sight. Kyudo's eyes widened. Aster had dropped low instead, compressing his mana further. He forced even more power into the sword and made it clear that he would no longer hold back. Kyudo felt it instantly. The fight was about to end. Aster brought his sword down with crushing force, the air screaming as the blade descended toward her. After the clash between the siblings, Kyudo slowly regained consciousness. She opened her eyes and wondered where she was. A few seconds passed before she recognized the room. It was her own bedroom. Warm sunlight streamed through the window. A voice nearby remarked that she was finally awake. Surprised, she turned her head and saw Malfa standing there. Malfa commented that she had certainly taken her time waking up. Kyudo immediately sat upright, panic flashing across her face. She demanded to know what had happened to the match. What was the outcome of her fight against Aster? Malfa explained that Aster had carried her back. He had said that she fell asleep in the middle of the duel and assumed she must have been exhausted from the long journey home. Kyudo rejected that explanation at once. Her gaze shifted toward her sword. Memories of the final exchange surfaced. In that last instant she had truly believed Aster had cut her down. But the truth was different. He had dispersed the magic blade just before impact. Only the remaining surge of mana had passed through her body. As she recalled the innocent look on his face, she admitted to herself that there was no way Aster would ever seriously try to kill his own sister. Yet in that brief moment she had been certain she was about to die. A faint smile crossed her lips as she muttered that he was an infuriating little brother, acting so boldly despite being smaller than her. She picked up her sword and asked where Aster was. She declared that she refused to accept the outcome of that match. Next time she would unleash her full power from the very beginning. Malfa interrupted her. If she was looking for Aster, he had already left. Kyudo froze. Malfa explained that a summons had arrived from the main house, addressed specifically to him. He had departed with their father only moments earlier. Kyudo had known nothing about it. Frustration filled her voice as she complained that no one had told her. The scene shifted. Aster and his father rode together in a carriage pulled by 2 horses, heading toward the elders of the family. Hefford explained that the men they were about to meet were the elder lords who supported the Elmhind family from the shadows. They were former heads of both the main and branch houses, as well as distinguished figures who had served under the Elmhind banner. Even in retirement they held immense authority. They were the hidden rulers. The ones who settled matters behind closed doors. These elders had shown no interest in Aster since the day he had been adopted. Now Hefford questioned why they were suddenly calling for him. Aster answered that it was most likely because of what had happened at the sword dance assembly. He had heard that the elders of Elmhind valued the family's reputation above wealth, and even above their own lives. He added that those who tarnished the family's name were thrown into beast cages and used as feed. His father looked surprised and asked where he had heard such a story. Aster answered vaguely, saying it was something from long ago. Then he added that he was prepared for whatever awaited him, vigilante punishment or even exile. His father questioned whether it had truly been fine to leave without saying goodbye to his sisters. Aster replied that it was fine. He had originally planned to leave the moment his sisters returned anyway. Kyudo disliked him. It was better if he stayed out of her sight. Without him around she could breathe easier. His hand brushed the hilt of his sword. Thanks to Kyudo he had begun to understand how to properly handle Graham. With a serious expression, he told his father that he now felt capable of drawing out even more of the Seven Wings' power. Whatever happened next, his father should not come to rescue him. He was prepared to survive on his own. Hefford was about to respond when a sharp voice interrupted them, questioning what he meant by surviving alone and criticizing his pride despite being the youngest. Both men turned in surprise. Kyudo had appeared. She pulled open the carriage door and climbed inside, demanding to know if he had truly run all the way there. She scolded him for leaving without saying a single word to his older sister. She had heard that the elders from the main house had summoned him. Neither she nor Malfa had ever received such a call. Hefford told her that she understood why he could not take her to the main house. She replied that she knew. They had been called back to manage affairs in his absence. She understood that much. Still, the summons meant the situation was serious enough to require caution. She reminded Aster of what Malfa had said, that he might not return. Aster tried to reassure her, saying it was an exaggeration. He was simply going to meet and speak with them. Yet inside he admitted that whether he could return safely was uncertain. After a pause, Kyudo admitted that she disliked him. He was male. He possessed 7 wings. He always received special treatment. He was stronger than her, even though she was the older sibling. And despite being younger, he carried himself like an adult. She hated all of it. But even so, he was her family. No matter how powerful he became or how mature he acted, he was still her little brother. She stood and ordered him to return home properly so they could have another match. She would not allow him to win and simply run away. Then she left. Aster watched her go, wondering what she had truly come for. His father commented that she was a good rival. Aster smiled faintly. Inside he offered quiet thanks to his sister. He would return. The gates swing open, and the guards receive Hayfried, informing him that the elders are already waiting inside. Men close in around them from every direction. Hayfried states that such treatment is unnecessary, since he already knows the route. The knights refuse to bend. They explain that strict escort orders were given, and they are only following them. It is painfully clear that the boy was not summoned there for comfort or kindness. Even so, the small protagonist feels a strange wave of nostalgia as he returns home. As they move through the halls, now bright as if touched by daylight, his father keeps speaking to him. The boy recalls that this is not the kind of place where he can afford to lose control. No matter what is said to him, he must hold himself back. He makes it clear that his reaction will depend on how those old men behave. His father immediately realizes how bad that sounds. With that mindset, everything could collapse into chaos. Still, the young protagonist is barely paying attention. His gaze drifts to the side, catching sight of everyone training. His father continues warning him to be cautious, but the boy remains distracted, focused on the clashes unfolding around him. Then the sword is taken from him, and the man beside him warns him once again to remain quiet and composed. The gate opens, and a voice announces the arrival of Lord Hayfried and his son. From somewhere in the back, someone remarks that Hayfried has finally appeared after 10 years. Hayfried drops to one knee and greets the 6th head, now known as the Great Elder. At that moment, the young protagonist fixes his eyes on the man standing behind everything in that place, the deepest shadow within the family, the one called Zenny's. At Zenny's side stand all the figures of power, every influential person gathered in one place. The boy recognizes some of their faces from the dance festival. But Rodrik is missing. Zenny's immediately states that the one the boy is searching for is not in that room. As the commander of the knights who serve the royal family directly, he has no time to waste on matters he considers beneath notice. He calls it a trivial matter, yet nearly 40 people are gathered in that chamber. The protagonist thinks back to his former life. Back then, he had been treated as such filth within that family that he had never even seen that old man's face once. Even so, one thing is clear to him. If that many high-ranking figures are present, then something serious is unfolding. Hayfried then demands to know what kind of trivial issue was important enough to drag them there. Zenny's answers that they should already know. Hayfried's dog caused trouble at the dance festival. The protagonist had already expected that answer. Hayfried responds that if this is about the conflict with Rodrik, then the matter has already been settled. But Zenny's dismisses that at once, saying it was nothing but a public act. It does not erase the stain left on the family's name. According to him, the real mistake happened much earlier, the moment this family chose to bring in an adopted child in the first place. Worse still, that same child ended up dragging the family name through the dirt. Because of that, they claim there is only one option left: exile the boy. And Hayfried's household will not escape untouched either. The protagonist asks why, since he alone is responsible for everything that happened. His father had no part in it. But Hayfried says nothing. Then he falls silent. The old man in the back speaks up, saying that the boy truly was not raised the right way. A child had no place stepping into a discussion among adults. In his eyes, the boy understands nothing about the weight of this family's name. He knows nothing of the conflicts and betrayals that built the path to the top. Even inside that very room at that very moment, many of those present desire only one thing: peace. Because of that, they need certainty that none of them will ever bring harm to the family. Then the old man turns the pressure toward Hayfried, reminding him of the time he failed, disgraced the family name, and paid for it when Rodrik cut off his arm in that same room. It all drags back to that day again. But this time the demand is even worse. Now they want him to cut the boy's throat. If he does it, the matter will be erased and buried. Hayfried refuses without hesitation, making it clear that he would rather lose his own life than strike down his own son. Zenny's presses him once more, asking if he truly means that. Because if that is his answer, Then today becomes the day he dies. And not only him. His wife dies. His daughters die. Everyone tied to him dies. The Viscount's entire house will be torn apart. Everyone in the room moves aside. Blades surround them from every direction. Then the protagonist speaks, asking what exactly the Great Elder is so afraid of. To him, it is miserable to watch a full-grown man act like that while shaking in fear. Fear of being bitten by his own dog. They can exile him or do whatever they want with him. But the moment they try to touch his family, everything changes. At that point he makes it clear that the one who will die is no longer him. At the same time he lifts his shirt and reveals the tattoo to everyone in the room, declaring through that act that if his family is killed, they will make an enemy of a seven-winged being. But the reality is simple. They can also kill him. And if he dies too, then he is no longer their enemy. That option still remains wide open before them. Seeing that mark, one person reacts in disbelief, wondering if it could really be the emblem of the seven wings. Another elder immediately rejects the idea, insisting that it has to be fake, since for hundreds of years that symbol appearing on a human body has been unheard of. Yet the fat elder cannot deny what is in front of him. That crest is impossible to mistake. As all of this unfolds, Zenith Elmheim steps forward, his voice cutting through the room with a heavy edge. He demands to know whether the boy truly understands the meaning of what he is showing them. The words hang in the air, tense and pressing down on everyone present. Hearing that, Aster answers in an almost casual way. But behind that tone sits a strange kind of confidence. To him the meaning seems obvious. The greater the number of wings, the more shocked people become. At that moment, the scene shifts to a blue-haired figure who has been watching everything with close attention. Instead of panic, a low laugh slips out of him. Rather than stopping the scene, he urges it to continue. His amusement clashes hard with the heavy mood in the room. Meanwhile, someone else nearby looks deeply shaken, clearly disturbed by what is unfolding before them. Watching every reaction around him, Zenith speaks again. This time, his explanation comes with full seriousness. To begin with, the wing emblem is an organ used to create magical power, a force once shared with humans by spirits long ago. By passing that power from parent to child, humans were able to deepen it and strengthen it over many generations. Even so, no one has ever reached the level of seven wings. That statement sends a wave through the room. Aster's expression hardens slightly as he questions whether that means he belongs to the spirit clan. Zenith holds his gaze and gives a steady answer. If those seven wings are real, then that may indeed be the truth. The tension grows even heavier. At the same time, Viscount Hayfried is seen staring at his son in stunned silence, the full weight of that revelation clear on his face. But Aster steps forward without a trace of hesitation. He states firmly that he is a child of the Viscount's house. At this point his birth no longer matters. His voice turns colder, sharper, filled with resolve. What matters now is whether everyone in that room truly has the determination to make an enemy of him. The very air seems to freeze as those words spread through the chamber. The revelation of the seven wings stops being just a shocking truth and turns into something far more dangerous, a direct challenge. Without the slightest pause he continues. His tone remains calm, but every word is measured. If he were to be cast out of Elmheim, then many among the martial nobility would most likely welcome someone with seven wings. And if that happens, then for those already living in fear of rebellion, the danger would grow far worse. His voice does not rise. Still, every word lands with precision. Rather than throwing him away, they should want him close, not cast aside. He presents himself as something greater than even Duke Rodrik, a living banner carrying the name of the seven wings. At that moment, there is not even the smallest trace of fear in his eyes. No doubt. No hesitation. Only clear resolve. Hearing that, every person seated in that chamber grows visibly tense, as the full weight of his reasoning settles over them like a dark storm. What he is offering is not just a plea for survival. It is political value. It is leverage. It is a shift in power. It is a dangerous possibility that none of them can ignore so easily. Meanwhile, inside his own mind, Aster reflects in silence. Just as that old man said before, Elmheim is not one united force. Cracks already run beneath the surface. And beyond that, a rebellion will come. A massive civil war will erupt and swallow the entire nation. He has already seen that future once. For the sake of his own survival and for the survival of the Viscount's house, he knows he cannot remain passive. At the very least, here and now, he must identify who stands as an enemy and who may become an ally, even if that requires taking risks. The determination inside him grows harder. This is no longer only about the seven wings, nor about the pride of nobles. It is about preparing for the coming storm, the one only he knows is on its way. After hearing all of that, Zenith Elmheim answers with open anger, his authority pressing down over the entire chamber. He challenges the idea that Aster has that much value. He points out that there is still no proof that the seven wings are real. His words are meant to crush the pressure Aster has built, using doubt, status, and intimidation. But Aster does not step back. Instead he smiles. If they truly believe the wings are fake, then they should kill him at once. The room falls silent. Then he continues, making it clear that if they go through with that, it will become a war between him and everyone in that room. Even so, behind that fearless face, his thoughts move with care. Killing someone like him right now would be easy. But if Elmheim truly decides to take this seriously, what choice will they make? Will they bite? He is gambling, but not blindly. Every move is deliberate. He knows they cannot act carelessly while uncertainty still surrounds the seven wings. As the tension pulls tighter and tighter, like a bowstring ready to snap, the blue-haired man suddenly rises to his feet and gives a light clap, almost as if the whole exchange is amusing him. He points out that the conversation is going in circles. Then, turning slightly toward the others, he smoothly proposes a solution. For now they should place Aster under a trial. At that, the heavy-set elder stiffens and starts to protest against Count Maze. But Count Maze cuts in before the objection can build, never losing his calm and relaxed manner. Because the truth is simple. They want to see it. They want to witness the power of the seven wings with their own eyes. His gaze sharpens slightly. After that, deciding Aster's fate will not be too late. And once again the air in the room shifts. What started as an argument has now changed into something far more dangerous. A test that could either prove Aster's claim or lead him straight to ruin. The blue-haired noble smoothly pushes the idea forward, asking what they think. This is the mansion of a world-famous martial clan, so preparing one or two proper trials should not be difficult. The moment Aster hears that name, his thoughts sharpen. Count Maze. There is no mistake. This man is an ally. That realization settles firmly in his mind. The timing of the proposal, the flow of the discussion, the way the conversation was turned, it all points to the same thing. It was a lifeline hidden behind curiosity. After a long silence, Zenith Elmheim finally speaks. He agrees. His tone stays cold but fully controlled. In his view, teaching a grandson who does not know how to speak properly is also the duty of an old man. With that, he turns and leads them away. Soon they stop in front of a heavy structure. This is the trial ground. The place is dark. Standing before the entrance, Zenith begins to explain. Beyond that darkness lies an underground bunker linked to the waterways. It was first built as an emergency shelter for evacuation. But now they are keeping a single magic beast inside it. Then he pauses on purpose. The trial is simple. Defeat that magic beast. That is all. The plainness of those words only makes the weight of the challenge feel even heavier. Hearing that, Viscount Hayfried lets out a deep sigh, unable to hide his frustration. The boy had always been troublesome. Always crying. Always screaming. And even after being warned over and over to keep the existence of the seven wings hidden, he still ended up here. There is disappointment in his voice. But there is worry too. Aster listens in silence. Then, without arguing further, he steps forward and places his hand on the door. Something that obvious could never stay hidden forever. He says it calmly as he pushes the door open. To him this was the perfect chance. The heavy door groans as it opens and thick, cold darkness spills out from inside. Whatever waits beyond is not just a beast. It is proof. And Aster walks toward it without hesitation. Hearing his son's resolve, Viscount Hayfried calls out to him one last time, his voice carrying both command and concern. He warns him not to lower his guard. Aster answers at once. Then he leaves. As he turns away, he briefly looks toward the blue-haired noble. Count Maze is smiling quietly, watching everything with calm interest. That faint smile stays in Aster's mind as he begins to descend. The moment he steps into the underground bunker, darkness closes in around him. The air is wet and heavy. The silence feels dense. It is clearly dark, but not so dark that he cannot see. And then he notices it. A severed head lies on the ground. Even in the dim light, the sight is unmistakable. At that moment, a voice echoes down from above, cold and detached. It says that even that one had been given a chance to clear his name. He had done nothing but cry and scream until the very end. Watching it had been unbearable. They are speaking about Duke Rodrik, the very owner of the severed head lying before Aster. The voice continues, carrying a faint but clear warning. It tells him not to disappoint them now. The meaning is obvious. This is not simply a test. It is a judgment. Then all at once the ground seems to shake. A huge presence rises from the darkness in front of Aster. A gigantic beast, terrifying and overflowing with power, stands before him. Its roar is enough to shake the entire underground chamber. The sound is so violent that it feels as if the walls themselves could split under that pressure. Aster tightens his grip on his sword. The blade gives off a faint shine in the dark. From above, the declaration comes again. Merciless. Now the trial begins.